Sephiroth was never beaten by strength. He was beaten by a cutscene the fandom still argues about. The most famous villain in Final Fantasy built his legend on a single unverified attack, while his real power, the ability to keep existing after death, gets ignored entirely. Somewhere beneath every god this franchise ever built sits something that never needed a plan to win. Sephiroth. The most famous villain in Final Fantasy is starting this list at the bottom, and that is not a mistake. Sephiroth has the name recognition. He has the sword, the coat, the one-winged angel silhouette that gets tattooed on people. What he does not have is a power feat that survives being fact-checked. His single most quoted display of strength is a cutscene. Strip away the reputation and look at what he actually is. Sephiroth is a fusion, Lucretia Crescent's body, carrying cells from the alien entity Jenova, which is how a human experiment ends up with superhuman strength, inhuman agility, and the ability to reach into the life stream itself. That part is documented fact, not fan theory. As Safer Sephiroth, he summons Meteor with the black materia, not to destroy the planet outright, but to wound it badly enough that the lifestream floods to the surface so he can drink it down and ascend. A plan built entirely around exploiting grief. Then there's Supernova. Stars die, planets get erased, and the sequence lands on the party like a highlight reel of the universe ending. Nothing in canon confirms he actually deleted star systems that day. Follow the pattern instead, and Supernova reads like a limit break, flexing in visual metaphor, not a record of real astronomical genocide. What is confirmed is worse in a quieter way. His body dies, his mind does not. He keeps shaping himself inside the life stream, infecting people with geostigma, walking back into the story through Kadaj years later. A man who wanted to become a god settled for becoming a haunting, but wanting to become a god and staying dead adjacent about it is one thing. Somewhere in this series, there's a villain who skipped the ambition phase entirely, got the job, and kept it for a full year while everyone else lived in the wreckage. Kefka Palazzo. Sephiroth talked about becoming a god. Kefka actually did it, and then used that power to accomplish absolutely nothing. That is not an insult. That is the entire horror of the character. Every other villain in this franchise reaches for the ending and gets stopped one scene early. Kefka reached the ending, sat down in it, and stayed there for roughly a year while the planet burned underneath him. He did not start as a monster. Kefka was the first Magatech Knight, a soldier fed into Gestalt's experiments to fuse magic directly into a human body. It worked. It also broke him permanently, and nobody involved seemed to think that trade-off was worth mentioning beforehand. He came out the other side with command over devastating elemental and status magic, and zero of the internal wiring that tells a person why power should have limits. That gap is what makes the next part possible. Kefka shoves the three statues of the warring triad out of alignment, and the imbalance tears the planet's crust apart. Continents shift, civilization collapses in real time. This is not implied off-screen the way Sephiroth's ambitions were. You watch the world break. Then he ascends, and the light of judgment starts firing from his tower, erasing entire towns whenever he feels like it. Not for territory, not for revenge. Boredom is enough. His final form is a multi-stage angelic tower ending in God Kefka, a being that radiates lethal magic just by existing, and casts Fallen One to drop your whole party to 100 HP without effort. Sephiroth needed an elaborate cosmic ritual. Kefka just stands there. He held the throne of a dead world for a year, ruling nothing, wanting nothing, fixing nothing. Ruling a broken world still means living inside time, waiting for someone to eventually climb your tower. Something else in this series looked at that same problem and decided the real solution was making sure there was no tomorrow left to climb into. Ultimacia. Say the plan out loud, and it sounds insane. Collapse every year of time into a single frozen instant so that only one person is left standing inside it. Not a country, not a planet. The entire concept of later gets deleted so she never has to face it again. Kefka broke a world because nothing was stopping him. Ultimacia is building a universe with no one left in it, and that's a very different kind of empty. On paper, she's the antagonist of a game about teenage mercenaries and a garden full of gunblades. In practice, she's a sorceress from a future so far out, the game never bothers naming it, and she doesn't fight her wars in person. She reaches backward through time and possesses sorceresses in earlier eras instead, wearing a Dea like a puppet, steering an entire war through a body that isn't hers. That's not a villain conquering the past. That's someone too hunted to show her own face in it, because sorceresses in this world get treated like a diagnosis. Feared, isolated, eventually killed. Ultimecia is exactly what that future produces when you corner someone for existing long enough. The fight itself escalates like the game is running out of ways to contain her. She draws Apocalypse. She junctions your own magic against you. She rips open pockets outside of time and drags the party into them, and then comes Ultimecia Griever, a fusion with Squall's own idealized Guardian Force, which means the final boss isn't just fighting the hero. She's fighting him wearing the shape of his own strength back at him. Nothing in the game confirms it outright, but the pattern lines up too well to ignore. A war fought entirely through possessed sorceresses, ending with one sorceress so afraid of being hunted that she erases the timeline rather than live in it. Follow that thread far enough and Rinoa isn't just the girlfriend in the party, she's the origin story. Time is the one battlefield where you can lose by winning, because a loop doesn't care who's inside it. Long before anyone tried compressing time, someone got trapped in it and turned the trap into a throne. Chaos S. In 1987, before Final Fantasy had a single sequel to its name, it ended its story with a villain who had already beaten time itself, and nobody has topped the trick since. Ultimecia spent an entire game chasing control over the timeline. Chaos never had to chase anything, because he was already living inside it, on repeat forever. The official story is simple. You fight a god of discord named Chaos, you kill him, credits roll. The real story is sadder and stranger. Chaos is Garland, a knight who loses a fight early in the game and gets hurled 2,000 years into the past instead of dying. Down there in the dark, he doesn't just survive. He transforms into something that can rewrite the deal entirely, becoming Chaos, then doing something no villain before him had the architecture to do. He sends the four fiends of earth, fire, water, and wind forward through time to grow strong, so they can loop back and feed that strength into him right before the moment he needs it most. Earth strengthens him, fire strengthens him, water and wind strengthen him, then the cycle starts again. He didn't build a weapon, he built a machine that manufactures himself. That's not a plan. Ultimecia had a plan, and it cost her everything trying to force it into place. Chaos just has a loop, quietly turning, asking nothing of him but patience. He's a knight who got thrown away by history and slowly became the thing doing the throwing. Mechanically, he backs it up. High HP for the era, real elemental magic, physical hits that punished underleveled NES parties. The first real god check in the franchise, and it works. Beating him doesn't just end a fight, it severs the loop. And severing the loop erases the entire chain of events that got you there. You win by deleting your own story. Later games couldn't leave that alone. Dissidia recasts him as a cosmic force locked in eternal war with the goddess Cosmos, less a knight, more a universal constant. Nothing in the original game confirms he's that big. Treated as the fandom's favorite promotion, not the receipt. A loop still needs somewhere to loop inside. Something else in this series decided that requirement was negotiable too. Exdeath. He's a tree. A literal, rooted, photosynthesizing tree, and he might be the most terrifying thing on this entire list. That whiplash is the whole point. Every villain before him at least started as something. Exdeath never did. He's a fusion of evil souls sealed inside an ancient trunk in the Guardian Forest, and instead of rotting there, he filled up. Souls kept pouring in, malice kept compounding, until there was enough hatred packed into that bark that it stood up and started talking. That's not a fallen king or a broken soldier, that's a container that reached capacity. What a container gets to use once it's full is the real problem. Exdeath commands the void, a nothingness that doesn't destroy things, it erases them. No wreckage, no ash, no epilogue. He uses it to consume Castle Tycoon off the map entirely. He breaks the seals holding it back and merges two separate worlds into one, which isn't a plot twist, that's a villain editing the planet's source code mid-story. Chaos needed a time loop to keep functioning, which meant a universe still had to exist for him to loop inside. Exdeath doesn't need the universe to cooperate. He treats its existence as the part still up for negotiation. Every threat ranked so far has been operating a machine bolted to reality. This is the first one holding the off switch. Neo Exdeath, his final form, doesn't even keep one face. He splinters into multiple entities, all speaking together, all promising to return everything to nothingness. Not conquer it, not rule it, delete it, only the crystals and every warrior of light combined can push that back, which tells you exactly how deep this thing was cutting. Somewhere in that castle, in that kingdom, in that world, getting spliced into another against its will, there were people who just wanted to keep existing. That's the wound Exdeath never had, because he was never a person losing something. He's the first thing on this climb, with nobody left inside to grieve it. Erasing a world is loud and fast and over. But there's something in this series that never finished the job on purpose, because it discovered that 1,000 years of coming back is worse than any ending it could hand you. Sin. You cannot win against sin. You can only rent a calm, and the bill always comes due on someone else's watch. That is the deal Spira has been signing for 1,000 years without reading the fine print. Sin looks like a war you fight and finish, a colossal, whale-shaped horror that levels entire cities with a single beam. Kilika burned. Zanarkand burned too, twice over if you count what it was before the war that created Sin in the first place. Giga Graviton alone can wipe a full party in seconds, and that same attack does exactly the same thing to buildings, streets, and everyone standing in them. Exdeath was proof that ultimate power hollows a person out until nothing is left inside to reason with. Sin is worse. There was never anyone in there to begin with. Strip the shell away, and the thing pulling the strings is Yu Yavan, a summoner so small and mindless he cannot even remember he is a person, just an instinct that calls armor out of pyre flies the moment the last set gets destroyed. Someone's father, someone's champion, spends everything they have to bring it down, and Yu Yavan rebuilds it before their kids finish grieving. That is why beating Sin has never once ended Sin. Every summoner who sacrificed themselves for a calm bought Spira some stretch of peace, sometimes years, sometimes generations, before the cycle reloaded and came looking for their descendants. 0 permanent victories in 1,000 years. It is not a monster anymore at that point. It is a habit the world cannot break, wearing a monster's shape. A cycle at least explains itself. You can trace Sin back to a parasite and a prayer, but there's something in this series that props up an entire world on its own body, powers every living soul on it, and spends that same power quietly trying to kill all of them at once. Orphan. Picture a heart that beats for you while quietly planning your funeral. That is Orphan, the final boss of Final Fantasy XIII, and it never once wanted to win. It wanted to lose in the most catastrophic way physically possible. Orphan sits at the center of Cocoon as the primary fal'Cie, the literal power source, keeping an entire floating world in the sky. It sustains the crystal stasis, runs the LC branding system, and feeds the whole fal'Cie network like a planetary breaker box nobody can shut off. Millions of people wake up, eat, sleep, and die inside a bubble that Orphan personally keeps inflated. Protect Cocoon. Keep it running, never stop. Except Orphan also wants Cocoon gone, not damaged. Gone. The theory behind why gets murky, but the pattern is not. Orphan believes mass human death on a large enough scale will drag its god back into the world, and it is willing to burn down its own life support system to test that theory. Compare that to the last entry on this list, a creature that could not choose anything ever. Orphan chooses. Every day it keeps Cocoon alive is a decision to wait, and every attack it throws at the heroes, from its ornate angelic form to merciless judgment tearing through the party, is a decision to speed things up. When Orphan finally dies, Cocoon does not shrug it off. The world starts falling toward Pulse, proving in real time that one entity was the only thing standing between a civilization and the sky giving out beneath their feet. Somewhere in that machine was a mind handed the job of keeping strangers alive that decided the fastest way out was to kill them all at once, on purpose to get somebody's attention. Beating Orphan does not stop that plan, it finishes it. But if a life support system can want its own switch flipped, just to reach something bigger than itself, the real question becomes who built the switch, who designed the whole architecture of gods and machines underneath it, and what kind of thing sits at the very top of that ladder waiting to be reached. Bunuvelzi. This is the being that everything below him, gods included, ultimately answers to. Orphan's death tore Cocoon out of the sky and unleashed the chaos that reshaped the world into Nova Chrysalia, and Bunuvelzi is the reason that collapse mattered. He is not a servant of the cosmology, he is the author of it. Bunuvelzi created the higher gods, Pulse, Linzai, and Etro, who in turn built the fal'Cie that ran Nova Chrysalia, and he inherited the throne of existence from his own mother, Mwyn. Every system, every lesser god, every rule stacked underneath him in this climb traces back to something he set in motion, and he does not just bend the rules, he owns them. Bunuvelzi wields double deity, a weapon built for a god, and he uses it alongside magic that stalls Doomsday itself, stretching out the world's remaining lifespan just to buy himself more centuries to finish his plan. He reaches directly into human souls and edits them. His plan is not conquest, it is renovation. He wants to build a new perfect world, handpick the souls worth saving, and wipe their memories and free will clean on the way in, purging everyone and everything he personally judges as imperfect chaos. That is not a villain's ambition. That is an editor's god complex, applied to every living mind on the planet. As a final boss, he fights like it, cycling through phases that mimic and counter the very systems and gods he engineered, throwing attacks that ignore your guard because guarding was never part of his design. Lightning and her allies do not beat him on a battlefield. They beat him on a metaphysical plane, tearing humanity's souls back out of his hands and ending his divine order for good. He is the ceiling, the top of the ascent, the literal author of everything ranked below him, so that's the top of the mountain. A god who made the gods below him and still lost. Every villain on this climb reached higher than the last. Which raises the only question left, the one this whole ascent was quietly built around, and its answer isn't at the top of anything. Omega and Shinryu. None of them have a name you'd recognize outside a strategy guide, and that's the whole point. Omega Weapon shows up across half the series, and every single time it beats the actual final boss on paper. In FFE18 and FFX, players build entire characters just to survive it, then watch its damage output dwarf whatever cosmic threat the story just spent 40 hours building. Shinryu does the same thing from a different angle. It's a dragon sitting on top of the best loot in the game, and in more than one title it's tied to the void itself, a thing that can cross between worlds while the hero is still trying to save one. Then there's Yzmat, which doesn't even bother with lore. It just has roughly 50 million hit points and turns a boss fight into a part-time job, some runs stretching past 3 hours of pure attrition, and Penance, locked behind every Dark Aeon in FFX, hits harder than Sin ever did. No speech, no motive, just Judgment Day wiping your party because it can. None of these things wanted anything. That's what made them impossible to plan around. Every villain this list has climbed past wanted something. A body, a timeline, a perfect world built from someone else's pain. Wanting something is a target. Sephiroth wanted to become a memory of his mother. Kefka wanted the universe to feel as broken as he was made to feel. Bunuvelze wanted a flawless creation with no room left for the people already in it. Omega and Shinryu want nothing. They just sit where the story never looks, outlasting gods by default. The strongest thing in Final Fantasy was never the one reaching for a wound to fix. It was the one with no wound at all. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.